Сан-Диего мы поехали обратно в Канаду на север по хайвею номер 1, Pacific Coast Highway, который проходит по берегу Тихого океана. Наверное, одна из самых красивых дорог в мире. С одной стороны океана, с другой стороны, увы, почти все время частная земля, поэтому пристроиться на ночь бесплатно всегда проблематично. Мы случайно познакомились со Стэном, его женой Карлой, их сыном Стефаном, и они любезно предложили переночевать у них на заднем дворе. Стэн провел экскурсию внутри и снаружи своего военного трактора Unimog, и дальше видео будет исключительно об этом.
You're gonna get in the picture too, right?
So it's a Freightliner FLU 419, and it's all based around a Unimog 416, is my understanding. And there's plenty of you out there that I'm sure are totally aware of more than I know. But it was built by Freightliner in Oregon and used by the Army. And its an acronym is this SEE, or Small Emplacement Excavator. And so it's basically a high-speed tractor because it has a Schmidt loader on the front and it has a case backhoe in the back. And the case backhoe folds over and so you were able to drive a skip loader / backhoe down the road at 51, 52 miles per hour.
Can you say in kilometers?
Oh, in kilometers? Okay, I'm going to have to think about that. So it's 83.
83, okay, yeah. Not bad.
So I believe when the speedometer is showing 52 miles an hour, it's something like 83 kilometers per hour. So it moves along, but at that point, the RPMs are at 3,000 RPM, and this thing is really screaming along. But I've done it. I've actually I've exceeded the speed limit on Pacific Coast Highway when going to get fuel. I actually driven a tractor over the speed limit on a highway. So it's a really interesting thing because it has a very high inertial rotational mass, and because there's a 3,000 pounds of skip loader out in front. But you also notice it has a tilt meter here.
What is that, by the way?
And so the ball is inside a tube, and it always wants to just fall to the lowest point.
It shows you how you...
Yes, so when it's at 0 in the middle, that would be perfectly level. And if the ball is clear over here, well, then the vehicle is leaning over 20 degrees. So I've had the bubble probably 22 degrees, and I think it's a good idea not to go any further than that. You can kind of get away with it if you put the backhoe, if you extend the backhoe out, deploy it, and then swing it to the uphill side, then you change where your center of gravity is. So, there's been some cases where I've had this really leaning over on the side, but I've had the backhoe stuck out. And at one point, we actually, my son and I, Stephen, we picked up a 4,000-pound tree with its root base and soil, and it's at that point, it's like the center of it is 10, 12 feet in front of the bumper of the Unimog. And the only way that it wouldn't raise the rear wheels and fall on the front was to put the backhoe extended out backwards as far as you could, so straighten out. So as we were driving down the road with this big tree on forks in front of the bucket, my son was operating the backhoe. When we'd go around a corner, he'd swing it one side to the other, and when we went down a steep hill and off to one side, he had to swing it to uphill so the whole thing didn't roll over. So you can change what you can do by versus the extent of this.
I wish to have one of those because every night we are trying to level up.
Oh, right.
To have a nice sleep.
And you can see it. Yeah, it would help because every time you pull in anything that isn't perfectly level, it always tilts some, and this tells you. Cool. So right now we're at 1 degree off.
What's that?
So this is a military switch. My understanding, this is kind of a common thing for the 1980s and maybe long before then. And so this is a military switch for the lights. So if you try and push on these knobs, it won't allow. These are for the instruments, and it won't allow any of these to light up unless you unlock it with a bit of force right here. Then you can put it to a position. The middle is off, and then there's stop lights, and then there's service drive, and so those are the headlights. When you can return it to middle, but you can't move it from there. So there's no possibility of getting in here and bumping these. You need two hands or use two fingers at the same time to turn on any lights. So if this were in a military situation where you wouldn't want to turn on your lights because somebody would see you, then you have to know you're doing it. And it also has a blackout marker light. So if you release here and go to blackout markers, it's got the faintest light ever in the world. So there are a couple of yellow lights in the front, and they're close to white, and a couple of red lights in the back. But even in total darkness, you can barely see them. And then there's a blackout driving light, which is in this position, and it has a green, I don't know if this is original, but a green LED in the front that illuminates the front. But it also
should not be original, I think.
Yeah, and that one light may be different, but this is all original.
Yeah.
And then these switches are, this is opposition, and this is dim instrument panel, and then when you switch to panel bright, that makes these lights bright. And if I turn on the power switch here, it also turns on these indicator lights. And so you turn on the key, and right now the instruments are light, but it's so bright you really can't see it.
I can't see what's going on.
But they're fairly bright, and when you turn it to dim, panel dim, it's fairly dark. And so if you're driving with your blackout lights on, it really doesn't illuminate much. You want to have these really low so there's almost no light in here, but there's enough so you can see what's going on. And it also tells you if you have the power takeoff on, and this one runs the hydraulic pump for the rear for the case backhoe. And this would be the high and low. So when you turn on the panel illumination, or actually in this case we just turn on the light, so you don't even have the panel illumination on. So I have the key on and the electric power on, and then it shows that the brake is set, and if I release the brake here, twist it and push it in, that brake light goes off. And also this is the power takeoff. That means that the pump is driven directly off the transmission. So that's a hydraulic pump for the backhoe, and the engagement arm is in the middle here. We can show you that too in a minute, but that means that this is engaged, and I can disengage it, and that should have been it. So I'm sitting on it here, but you need to won't put the clutch in anyway.
And what's that?
This light is meaning that the water temperature is under normal for driving. And then this red lamp means that the air pressure is below a minimum of 90 psi, and it usually runs at 110 to 120 psi, and that's for the brakes. Anything else that uses air pressure. And you can connect up to this and use it as an air compressor, and there's two tanks underneath. But right now you can see that there's no pressure being used in the brakes, but I push on the brake pedal, and that brings that pressure up. It's never going to go past this other one, and as I keep using the air, the tank is dropping down. So the tank pressure is this one, and this one's the brake pressure. And then here it's the fuel tank level gauge, and then this one's the oil pressure gauge.
What about that green big switch?
Oh, this one. This is the turn signal.
Really?
So you have this turn signal stock over here, but this one is if you're turning and if you have your lights on. No, you have to have. Oh yeah. So if you have it on normal driving, then this goes on. When you have it on blackout, it does not flash the turn signals. Mm-hmm. You only have the very dim lights. So right now you can see the panel bright, and then this is the panel dim. So now I've left turn signal, and now it's over here is right turn signal. It doesn't cancel or have anything to do with the steering wheel. And the funny thing is this doesn't move back and forth, left or right. It just goes in and runs the horn. So this entire switch right here is just for the horn.
Seriously?
Seriously. And this is auxiliary valve for the brakes, for a trailer brakes. And you can connect a trailer to the front of it or the back of it. And I'm sure there's some other uses that I'm not aware of, but you know, this is how you can remotely do that. And they have a notice right here that says not for setting for parking brakes, so they don't want you to set this and cause, you know, your trailer to hold you still. Anyway, that gets rid of those.
How you used to use it as a turn signal when you're driving?
Yeah, a few times I've actually used it, you know, for a turn signal, and especially if you're just on some streets and you're about to swing the bucket around, you definitely want people to know you're turning, because that, you know, that gets their attention. And another thing that's always fun to do that gets people's attention is you can put the bucket way up in the air, and nobody's going to give you a hard time because you're sitting there with 3,000 pounds of bucket in front of you.
And these two things?
Okay, so this, I think your Unimog is probably the same, but if you look really closely, there are little squiggly lines every about 1/8 of an inch,
on the
windshield. So there's little squiggly little wires that go up and down and back and forth.
Yeah. No.
Oh, really? Because they're very fine.
Them.
Oh, you can. Okay. So when you pull the left one, that turns on the left half of the windshield, and the right one heats the right half of the windshield.
Don't have that.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool feature. I've never had this in freezing, so I've never actually been able to use it, but right now this is actually warming up. I can't feel it yet, but I know it is, because there's a slight drop in voltage when you, I mean, it's ever so slight. I've done it with a voltmeter, which brings us back to the voltmeter over here, which is a 24 volt system. And right now, without the engine running and just the dash lights on and the marker lights, it's still 26 volts. And when you fire it up and then you give it a little rev, it runs up to 28, 29 volts. And then this last knob here, which is just another knob out of a 1970s Mercedes, is, and I've never used it before, but what this does is you pull it out, and I think you
increase the.
No, this is actually this switches a. There's the pressurized canister with ether in it, so it's in under the hood right to the right. And so if it's cold and you need to use ether to start it, then, and I've yet to learn how you actually do this, but I guess you pull it out and you crank the engine. But I really need to reread that.
But it's
okay.
over there.
And how does that one work?
We never used it.
Okay, yeah.
We don't have that liquid which is supposed to
Oh, right.
there.
And these are weird because it's a pre-pressurized canister and you spin it on like it's propane or something. So that's...
And this one is hazard lights?
Yeah, so this one, my understanding is if, and I may be wrong, but if you have everything turned off and you press this button, it should, my understanding is that it would make the voltmeter work. So you don't have to turn everything on to check the voltmeter, but it doesn't seem to work. Or it's something I need to learn, but it's a Bosch button, you know, it has the Bosch symbol on it. But yeah, that's something I need to relearn.
Okay.
And an interesting thing about this dash, and I don't know if it's all with all the rest of them, the 416s, is it's a rubber covering over the metal is the same exact shape, and so it's just a fairly thin covering. And I think at some point in the military they painted this with a black rubber stuff on top of the rubber. So this is the would be the vent, except for it's running into the fops, the FOPS, which is the falling object protection system, which is a whole panel that extends from what they call the ROPS, the ROPS, which is rollover protection system. You can see a little bit of it here, and it's basically goes from the frame below, comes up, and it goes to a cross member, and that's if this thing ever rolls over, it keeps the cab from being deformed. Because it picks up all the load and puts it down into the frame. Otherwise, you've got a huge amount skip loader in the front and backhoe in the back that could end up flopping things over and nothing really protecting the cab. So that essentially keeps things from falling straight down into and through the cab. One of the problems is when they design it, they allow it, it's about 5/8 of an inch. So, you know, you get a little bit, tiny bit of ventilation through there, but you can't open this up. In the area between the seats, right above the transmission, of course, this is the engine cover, and the back of the engine is about right here. So, well, the controls here is this is a power key. The power key, you can remove it, and it has a curved slot here that goes down, and what it does is there's a disconnect for all the power. So when you push down and rotate, and this makes a connection, and then everything's powered up. You still have the ignition switch, but this is basically a kill switch. And this is a release or a set for the air brakes for the external, or I may be wrong and somebody needs to correct me on that. But and then this is the power takeoff. So if it were running, you need to put the clutch in, and you engage the power takeoff, and the power takeoff on this one goes out the back, and it's connected to the rear hydraulic pump, which runs the case backhoe.
By the way, do you need a special driving license? How you drive it? You just bought it?
Oh, for this? Yeah, no. I think nobody knows enough to know to make any issue about it. But we can't drive it up our local road because it exceeds the weight maximum of 8,000 pounds is the most you could have, and this is something like 14 to 16,000 pounds depending on how much it's loaded, so to speak. So this is the differential, and the differential lock and the center differential lock. So in this position, it's just rear wheel drive, and the front is open, and obviously is the front isn't engaged at all. So there's the front differential is open, rear differential is open, and there's no engagement for the front. And then you turn it to this position, and the graphic shows that you have front and rear drive. So it's four-wheel drive, but they're open differentials. And then when you go to the third position, it's both front and rear differentials locked and engaged four-wheel drive. So this is an air operated switch, so when you release it, it lets compressed air out. Then these two controls, you can see the graphics showing where that is, but the one that's furthest away from the driver is the bucket, and you raise it, or by releasing it, you're holding it, and when you push down, it lowers the bucket, and that rotates the bucket forward. This one rotates the bucket backwards or upward. Now this one is for the whole boom, which means the entire skip loader. So you push down and it drops it. And I should really say that if you raise it, it raises it. If you let it go, it holds in one position. If you lower it, it lowers it. And if you push it down to where it locks there, it will be in a float position. So you could drive it down the road and have the skip loader bucket pushing along the road, and it will float and allow it to go up and down. And then you just pull that up and release it, and then it's back to up or down.
Yeah, so you figured everything out yourself, or you had
I read some stuff, and some of this I've had to figure out, and it has been interesting because as time's gone by, it started to get sticky, so I have to read more what's causing that, and so there's definitely a few jobs I need to do.
And the gears, so there are 4 gears?
Yeah, so it's a 4-speed transmission, and it doesn't have a reverse or forwards, but it does have, this also has a 2-speed secondary transmission, so you can split it. So that's high, this is low, and so it essentially makes for between this high and low and 4 speeds, you get 8 different ratios. Then there's this lever, which is basically gives us the reverse, and since I have the ignition on, you get the beeping, you know, ignition and the lights are on. If you turn the lights off, then you don't get the beeping in the rear. And so there's only one low range in reverse. When you bring it forward there's a neutral and there's a high range forward, and then you bring it over here and there's a low range, and right now it won't engage because the engaging teeth are lined up. But this gives you basically two different ranges and 4 speeds. So in forward you have 16 different ratios, and in reverse you have 8 different ratios to go with. Yeah, so it gives you a variety, and the low gear is pretty low, but I know it's not the lowest that you can get on the Unimog. This is a radio connection, which I don't understand, but it's possible to have a communications head. Somebody should correct that. Connected in here for radio, and then I think these wires go to power and also for antennas, so you could hook up antennas or other apparatus outside, but I believe this is sort of a standard radio connection. It may be something entirely different. It may be a remote control so you can make this thing fly. And also, by the way, these are set up and were built so I think you could drop them out of a C-141. So they put these on pallets and they strap them all down, and they put a parachute on it and they toss them out of an airplane. And so this was made to land, you know, get thrown out of an airplane, which is, you know, pretty wild for something that's 15,000 pounds.
And returning for this missing part.
So when you go like I think like most of these early Unimogs, the injection pump is mechanical, so there's no electronic shut off. So if you want to shut off the injection pump, bring it down to 0, you go there. And so, but if you bring it up past this stop and then push it forward to the stop, this is idle, and you can always just bring it. This is full throttle, so this works kind of like a tractor. So if you want to get in on the back and use the backhoe, then you just set the throttle to whatever speed you want it to be at, and it goes pretty much through the full range of RPMs.
We don't have that.
Yeah.
And what you said was what you did wrong?
Yeah, so this is the 2-speed range that's on the shifter. It's this sliding sleeve. And the light's going to stay on because I don't have any air pressure right now or enough to have it disengage. Also, I haven't put the clutch in. So once you put this from high to low and you put the clutch in, and if there was enough air pressure, then it would switch off. But right now, being in this position, it's in the arrow says it's sliding down, the sleeve is slid down, so that's the low range. And then this next one over here, this is the symbol for the power takeoff. So if I engage the power takeoff, wait, no, that's where there's some confusion going. So these lights signify, at least for the first one, this is the low and high range. So whenever this is lit up, it means the 4-speed transmission low range, which is this sleeve. When you slide it down into the lower position, that's the low range. And so when that is lit up, it's indicating you're in the low range. And it's a pressure activated shift, and you have to put the clutch in for it to activate. And I believe it should be running, but it's an air pressure system. So the second one is the darn it,
battery.
This light is the power takeoff because it's coming out the side, and that's the power takeoff, which runs the pump in for the case backhoe, and that the hydraulics for the Schmidt loader on the front is activated or run by a hydraulic pump that's on the engine that's always being turned by the belt. So this is the high and low range on the shifter, and you move the sleeve down into low range and that lights up. When the light isn't lit, it means it's in high range.
And brake red means that you're on.
Yes, so this is the parking brake, and I think won't hurt if we let it go, but it might roll. So
No. Let's
let's
not even try it.
turn this 90 degrees and then slide it in, or it wants to spring down, and then the brake light goes off. And then this light, if we were actually running, would be activated by putting it in all-wheel drive, in four-wheel drive, and locking the differentials, which would be the third position on this lever down here.
So, by the way, here, the whole thing.
So this whole lid comes off. It's pretty difficult, but it was one of the first things I ever did to this. So there's attachment straps. So if you undo this, take it off the pin there, take it off the pin here, and there's another one over here, and then you lift the whole thing off, but you have to get it jockeyed out of here, get the shifter out of the way, and then lift it up, and it barely fits out the door, but then you can sit there and drive down the road and work on your engine. Now yours, it has a door that...
Yeah, it has a door, and you see what's...
Oh, cool. Yeah, and this bump that goes further back here is not the head. Actually, right here under this is a overflow reservoir for the cooling system. So it's the highest thing. The top of the head is somewhere around here, and it comes back to here. Okay. And the exhaust and the intake manifolds are on this side. I've always been interested in Unimog since I saw the pictures, but my first one I ever saw was after I met my wife, and we went down to Costa Rica, and there was one in a Mercedes dealership in San Jose in Costa Rica, and it was only a couple blocks from the hotel we were staying in, so I got to check that out. And once we realized we wanted to get a tractor, I didn't really want to get a typical tractor, and we always thought it'd be cool to have a Unimog, but it seemed like an extravagance. And so we were forced in a situation where we wanted to make some sort of decision, and became aware of the FLU 419, which is a Freightliner product for the U.S. military. This one's built in 1988. And so it was a perfect opportunity to have a tractor for doing work and building our house, doing the basement, and also still having a Unimog. So that's when we ended up finding about these and started doing a search, and ended up finding this one that was fairly good condition and owned by a person in Wisconsin. And he had excavated for a basement on his house. He was done with it and wanted to move it along, so we bought it, and we had it shipped out from Wisconsin out to Malibu, and that was $3,000, and it was a great thing when it finally came. It showed up at 4 o'clock in the morning and went down to Pacific Coast Highway and drove this, got into this thing, first time I'd ever driven a Unimog, and drove it off a truck, and it was like 8 feet in the air to start with, so you're looking down about 15 feet, or it seemed like. Anyway, drove it off a truck, and it's fun to drive around because you can impose on other people, with a Schmidt loader, a skip loader sitting in the front. It gets attention. And if somebody really gives you a hard time, you can always pick up their car and just dump them off the side of the road. But usually you're worried about making sure that people see this and they don't run into it. So it's kind of handy that it does have turn signals, which you saw earlier, the little switch, but I almost never use them. The FLU 419 is a military vehicle, and so it has lots of acronyms. And so there is this framework that comes from the frame, goes up and goes across down the other side, is called a ROPS, or ROPS, and it stands for Rollover Protection System. And this canopy that attaches to it is called a FOPS, or FOPS, or Falling Object Protection System. So if you have something heavy falling down, this is a fairly thick piece of metal. I think it's 3/16 of an inch, and so that's protection. And since it has a loader in the front and a backhoe in the back, there's always potential for this to roll over. So it's kind of it's encouraging to know that you've got a framework there to potentially keep the cab from getting squished or deformed.
And this is for what?
This is
This down.
okay.
Underneath.
So this, I believe, is one position for a light that exists right here, and that is the the blackout light. And so when you're in really dark conditions where you don't want to have very much light, but you want to be able to have other people see you, you put it in blackout lighting position. And I believe that this was an enclosure for the blackout light, but at some point they realized it was illuminating the bucket when the bucket was in the wrong place, so they decided to put it up here. So I don't know if that was original or done in the military, or if it was done later. But there is a green LED that's on the other side there when you have it on blackout lighting that illuminates, and it's very dim. And also these are the front running lights. And they are very dim. If during the daytime you could turn these on, you almost could not tell that they're on. And so these lights are essentially the headlights. These lights are all intact, but they're not connected, so they don't turn on when you turn on the headlights, 'cause otherwise they would just illuminate the back of the skip loader. Of course, you can raise the skip loader enough to where you're illuminating the back side of the skip loader, but you know, these are fairly good for work lights. Another thing that's kind of interesting about this and a little bit scary is the paint on this is a CARC, which is chemical agent resistive coating. And it's my understanding, which is really limited, is that when some chemical agents get on here, that they don't tend to absorb in, and they're more easily washed off. So this paint is really weird and kind of amazing, but also turns out you can't just buy this paint and put more on because it's highly toxic, and but it's really tough. And it's also amazing how you can see this paint and you think, well, you could throw some wax on this and wax it really well, come back 10 minutes later and it's flat again. It's just amazing. And you could put Armor All on it and you think, oh, that's going to do it, and then it just sucks that stuff up and it stays flat. Wow. Now if you get a whole bunch of hydraulic fluid or grease on it, yeah, there's no way to get around that. But it's amazing how I've like, yeah, I'm going to put some wax on this, just see what happens, and it really wants to stay flat, which makes it also, you know, a little more stealthy. Yep. So interesting thing about this Schmidt loader is that, of course, it's attached to the front. So the front of the bucket is, I think, over 9 feet ahead of the center line of the front wheels. So it's actually a greater distance from the front of the loader bucket to the center front wheels than it is to the back wheel. So there was a time...
What's going on with the insurance?
Yeah, so... I'm sure we weren't covered for that, and luckily we have an umbrella policy, so hopefully nobody's listening there, right?
It's like a old-timer...
You know, I've asked about it. Our insurance company doesn't cover something like this, and so we basically have property insurance, and evidently that would cover us in that case. But I would say if something ever happens, that we're going to have to argue that subject. So if somebody knows a better way to deal with that, we just call their insurance company, and they didn't have a solution. So and the interesting thing about this is another interesting thing about this is that since it's actually considered road construction equipment, it's called a small emplacement excavator. It can be registered as special equipment, and it can be registered so that it's road construction special equipment, and it has a registration that's something like $35 every 2 years. And but here's the thing, and so it's considered a tractor in that respect, but you can drive a tractor down the road. But this one actually has a license as special equipment. It turns out that these Unimogs with these diesel engines from this era it used to be possible to register them in California. They're not letting any more in. So if I had just gotten this if it was just a Unimog, 416, I wouldn't have been able to register it, and I would have to basically, put stuff on it and make it into a tractor. But since it is a tractor and a road building equipment, was able to register it that way. And
what is inside the boxes?
Okay, so inside these boxes, this one is the hydraulic fluid tank, and this is a level sensor here. So in this box, I have things in the way, but this is a tow hitch that I can attach to the bucket in the front and put, you know, ball hitch or anything else to the front of it. So that was just something I added, sort of like being able to have the forklift, the forks. And so what this is a hydraulically operated drill. So this is a hammer drill, and then this is a jackhammer. So this I've never pulled this out completely, but supposedly it's about 120 pounds. Then in this space right here is Stanidine diesel conditioner, and then there's a spare hydraulic hose, and I have my grease gun, and this is a hydraulic hammer drill. So this would go into this drill, and this is, you know, just one of the bits. There's some other bits in here that are a little bit smaller, and then in the back here, these are extra filters.
Everything you bought with the vehicle was inside there?
Yeah, and I've added a few things, but and this is a flare kit. I've never even really looked inside it. So if you're going to use the jackhammer and you need a big spade for it, this goes in this jackhammer.
Wow.
And there's another point for it.
You never tried it?
I have not tried the jackhammer, but I did try. So yeah, I have to do that and have to try the drill, because it also comes with, and this is, you know, part of the whole FLU 419 is a hydraulic chainsaw, Stanley hydraulic chainsaw. The only problem is there's some leaks in these hoses, so I need to get them replaced. And amazingly, this is like $400 worth of hoses, so that's something I'm working toward. And here I have a construction helmet and a you know, a yellow vest. So anyway, but this has this plastic piece that's totally formed for this equipment, so it all has its space right here. So this is the base for my crane, because the wheel is over there at this height, the spare tire, and so this crane attaches. This is the crane base, and it's pretty difficult to get. Anyway, it has a base that's on top of the falling object protection system, so that panel's up on the left, so you can swing the crane around and then lift the tire up, swing it out, and drop it down.